Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Robert Schmid, also known as Mr. IoT. I am the Chief IoT Technologist for Deloitte with a deep passion for all things digital. This week on Coffee with Mr. IoT, yes, we are back. We took a long break. I'm talking with Brad Surak. He is the Chief Product and Strategy Officer at Hitachi Vantara, and we're going to talk about IoT in 2020. Brad, good morning. It's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm great, Robert. Happy New Year. Thanks for, I'm honored to be your inaugural guest for 2018. Thanks for
my inaugural guest for 2018. It's so awesome to have you. I'm so glad to be back. You just, first of all, you're a client of mine, right? You're my client, and I love that, right? It's so great to work with you. But also, you're one of those people who's been around IoT for quite a while. You actually been leading, if you wish, the industrial internet for a while. Did you actually come up with that term, the industrial internet? Was that one of your inventions?
It is not. I wish it was. I was around the day that it happened. It was Bill Rue's invention, actually, over at GE Digital. He's great with that kind of stuff. And then John McGee, who's working with me now here at Hitachi, really took it and built the brand out and started to drive it with the Minds and Machines stuff. But yeah, I thought it really flew. That was one of the first innovations that came at GE Digital, was the name Industrial Internet. Everyone loved that.
It's interesting, right? I mean, you work at Hitachi today, so I got to ask you, Hitachi.
Yeah.
Tell us about it. Tell us what you do there, and then can you talk about what's Vantara? I mean, how did that come about? What does it mean, actually?
Yeah, sure. Hitachi's a couple of different things. I just joined. I'm 3 months in to Hitachi. I joined October 1st, and I took over product management and engineering for all the products in this Vantara organization. Vantara is brand new. It was just launched in August, but it was composed of a number of different parts. So if you look at Hitachi, it's a number of things. It's a big company, been around for. The whole company has been around for 107 years, and if a lot of people think of Hitachi on the industrial side, the bullet trains that operate in Japan, Hitachi manufactures those. They operate those. The rail network in Japan that never late, always super reliable. That's Hitachi, and they make medical equipment. They make construction equipment. Largest elevator distributor and manufacturer in China. It's got a ton of cool toys to go play with, and then they also have this IT side. So if you think of Hitachi Data Systems, Hitachi, they invented a mainframe computer back in the 50s that was marketed domestically in Japan. Then they got into storage, and they really innovated in storage, and so that became Hitachi Data Systems, and that's 40-year-old company within Hitachi. They took that, and then they took their IoT division around Lumada, and they took the analytics, advanced analytics technology, and some of the Pentaho stuff. They put it all together, Hitachi Vantara, and so it's a new company that's created from parts of of the organization, and really to focus on digital technology and driving advanced analytics, IoT, artificial intelligence. As well as data is a big part of that. So all of the data infrastructure capabilities that Hitachi Data Systems had it's a really interesting mix of technologies.
So tell me, you had a great story on the industrial internet. What's the story on the name Vantara?
On the name Vantara? Yeah. Well, if you look at the rest of Hitachi, all the names are, let me just say, they're very just descriptive. It's like Hitachi Rail, when they do rail stuff, and we didn't want to box ourselves in, to say we didn't want to even call it Hitachi IoT or Hitachi Digital, right? Because we don't really look at it as who knows how this market's going to evolve. We don't want to pick a technology name, so we picked a name that didn't have any. If you look it up in the dictionary, it has no meaning. But it's like vantage point, it's advantage, that's the way the naming consultants kind of helped us understand it. And so we wanted a name that was really a blank slate that we could, associate with, the strategy of the company as the strategy evolved. But we didn't want to pick a technology or something that would, 5 years from now, everybody would be looking at it and kind of scratching their heads why what do we really do?
Got it. So it's a name. Cool.
Yeah, and it's hard to pronounce in Japanese too, which is like
oh really?
Always fun in meetings. Yeah.
Well, I think the Japanese would tell me that anything I say in Japanese is hard to pronounce anyhow, because my German background, I always sound like I have a sore throat or something like that. So when we prepped, you told me you started working out of Purdue at an internship where you actually, I believe you said Whirlpool.
Yeah.
You know, Whirlpool is one of the companies that does a lot of IoT. So you've been doing IoT or connected machines for a while.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was cool back then. I took a course at Purdue in my junior year in computer science. It was called Ubiquitous Computing. And actually, I think IBM had, some of the IBM researchers would come and do lectures for us. It somehow had an affiliation there. Started learning about, you know, IoT back then. It didn't call it IoT. And then I started taking it to work. I had a job. I had to pay my way through college, so I was working for $5 an hour at the Whirlpool parts packaging facility off campus. And I started working in the, you know, just packaging parts. And then they realized I was a computer science guy, and they pulled me into the IT department. And so for all through college, I worked in the IT department at Whirlpool. And I'd go in and I'd do my, you know, my day job. And then we'd talk about how we could connect up washing machines to the internet and the cool things you could do with a washing machine connected to the internet. And then I'd take it back to my ubiquitous computing course and, try to mix what I was learning in with all of that. But got to take a trip to corporate Whirlpool to go give a presentation on that and talk to some of the smart guys who were thinking that. Now they've turned it into a business. Not that I had anything to do with it, but it was like they've really taken it and gone far with it. It's
funny, if you look up IoT on Wikipedia, what they say is the very first use case of IoT was actually, I'm sorry, I have to tell you since you're from Purdue, but it wasn't at Purdue, it was Carnegie Mellon. And what they did, have you heard this? Have you heard that story before?
No, I haven't heard about it.
It's such a student story. The students were living on the 7th floor, and the Coke machine was on the 1st floor. And they wanted to know if there was Coke in the machine before they went 6 stores down. And so they instrumented the machine to tell them if it was empty or not. And that was the first time they had an IoT going on. So that's what Wikipedia says. So I thought that's pretty cool.
I made a little app like that one time. My dad was a smoker, and so he ended up getting on an oxygen machine. And he had one in the house. It was like this big tank and had a long hose that he'd go walk around the house. But every once in a while, he'd have to change the adjustment on the. So I got an Arduino board, and I got a little servo and hooked it up to the little knob on his. I'm sure it wasn't HIPAA compliant, but he. And then I made an iPhone app for him so he could go in and adjust his oxygen up from wherever he was in the house. So that was my one normally coding product.
I'm impressed. Yeah, I'm impressed. I had to do a podcast, and I always get to ask the questions. It's kind of much easier to ask the questions and then listen. And then I was asked, and they asked me, "What's the most wacko thing I have at home?" That would have really been a good one. So let's talk a little bit about the future of IoT. Where is it going to go? Where are you going to take us? What are you going to bring us to next, Brad? I mean, you've been leading this for a while with big companies. Where are you going to take us in addition to servo-controlled oxygen tanks?
I think, you know what, I've grown up over the last few years around the IoT space, implementing it in practical industrial environments mainly, and hard ROI and understanding the complexities of getting these large pieces of industrial equipment connected and what you can do with it. And I think I've come to look at it, IoT, not as a market. I think there's a lot of talk about IoT platforms as a category. I don't really feel like that's the right way to think about it. I personally, anyway, think about it as an architectural disruption, the way cloud was, where you had your on-premise solutions and data centers and technology, and then the cloud came along. It wasn't this like thing that you just bolted on top of everything you had in your enterprise architecture. It changed every layer of the architecture. So you had to go to the hybrid cloud, in your infrastructure layer, you had your middleware changed, your app layer changed, right? Siebel went away, Salesforce emerged, all the business model disruption that came with that. So it was an architectural disruption. And I think IoT is the same. It's really disrupting at the edge, and now we're looking at, I think if you look at it as edge to cloud architecture, and then you understand, what does that mean for my infrastructure, my data infrastructure? What does that mean, for my application layer? All of the different layers of the enterprise architecture get impacted by this, but it's not just something you bolt on, on top. I think it's something that if you're dealing with this change, you got to think of it as an evolution, same way you thought about how cloud impacted your enterprise. And I think vendors have to address it the same way. We have to, at least, for us, I'm just thinking as how does storage and all the compute and everything change when you have the edge to cloud, mindset, and how do the data pipelines evolve? It's really how do you create these data pipelines for applications that need to use edge data, need to use structured and unstructured transactional data, and need to do model processing in the cloud. All of that is necessary, and so I think we have to think in those terms, or at least that's how I think about it.
So IoT isn't a technology. IoT is an architectural disruption, is what you're saying. It really is sort of.
Yeah, and if you go in these industrial companies, these guys have been doing IoT for like 40 years. It's not machine to machine and all the control systems and things. It's now the difference is just how it all gets architected in with the enterprise, architectures that are out there.
That's awesome. By the way, if you're just joining us, you're watching Coffee with Mr. IoT. My name is Robert Schmid, and I'm the Chief IoT Technologist for Deloitte. And with me today, I have Brad Surak, the Chief Product and Strategy Officer at Hitachi Vantara. We're talking about IoT in 2020. So IoT as an architecture disruption, you talked about just, the edge. So the idea is that computing is actually moving towards the edge. At first, I don't know, I remember when I was the CIO, it was all about what's in the data center and what's in the cloud, right? Yeah. So as a CIO, the saying was, we're going to lose control of the data center because we're giving the key away. And people moved in the cloud. Today, I feel like there's sort of like general acceptance now that the cloud is actually a very safe place. Sometimes even more often, even a safer place than your own data center. It's a little bit like, put your money in the bank rather than keep it at home. Yeah. And then now we're moving actually a bunch of compute out to the edge, at the device, at the sensor level, at the gateway. I think IDC said that in 2020, we're going to have 40% of all compute on the edge. Isn't that scary? I mean, as a regular user, isn't that scary to think that there's going to be computing happening all around us? What do you think?
I don't know. Scary is depends on the perspective, I suppose. It can be scary. It's scary. Cloud was scary for a lot of people too, right? Yeah. I'm losing control of my data. I'm moving my critical data into somebody else's infrastructure, and I think those fears are well founded. But then that's what we do. All of us, right, in this industry, we innovate in ways that belay those fears. I think compute at the edge is a powerful capability. I kind of think it's not like the compute's moving all to the edge or anything like that. I think we're moving towards distributed applications. And that can be scary too if you're a developer, right? What's a full stack developer nowadays? Everyone advertises, I need a full stack developer. Well, now what do I need to know? Control systems, SCADA systems, historian databases, all the way up through all of the cloud technologies. Like, what's full stack? And how are we going to get people who understand how to distributed application development is not something that you learn very easily in a few courses. That's hard to do. And so I think the infrastructure in general, enterprise infrastructure has to evolve in a way that it abstracts some of that complexity. Developers can get apps out quicker, and the value can get connected faster. And I think we have to take some of that fear out of it by putting more control into the infrastructure and management into the infrastructure layer. But right now, it's not set up for that, right? I think we've gotten comfortable with hybrid cloud environments, in our enterprises.
What is that? Hybrid cloud is such a weird term.
Data center. What was that, Miss?
Hybrid cloud. That's such a weird term. What is that? It doesn't exist. It's either cloud or it's not.
Well, I mean, I guess if you think you're a hybrid infrastructure, you're some stuff you want to have running in your own data center, some stuff you're going to have in the cloud, right? And now, running into, what do you think, like regulatory compliance now, too, totally challenging. What do you think of an airplane that takes off in Germany, in Berlin, and flies to Beijing, but you're capturing data on the whole flight? Like, if you're capturing data in Germany, you're supposed to stay in a German data center, right? Like, it has to be like physically there. Well, I think China has something similar. So the data's traveling, and you offload it when you land. What do you do with that? How do you comply, with the regulatory regimes associated with that? But that's a hugely valuable, application for a lot of reasons. So I think you can think of it as scary, or you can think of it as fun and interesting. That's how I look at it.
I have to tell you that airplane example. I always thought that data residency is a really weird concept. Because, I mean, what about my data? I'm not resident either, right? Yeah. But in any case, I love that airplane example. So that's great. Let me ask you, you talked about something that was interesting when we talked about IoT in 2020 and 2030 and where you're going to take us in your role as the Chief Product and Strategy Officer. You talked about IoT platforms, and I don't know, I'm going to say something, and this isn't what you said, but this is how I heard it. There's I think when we look, there's 300 or 400 IoT platforms out there. There's probably 10 well-known ones, and you guys have one, and you work with another company that had one right before. But I don't know, you said something and it sounded to me like it's the death of the IoT platform.
Yeah,
and that's not what you said, but I'm just gonna.
You know what? I think it is. At least it's the old age of the. It's in the end of life here. I think so. You look at how many platform books came out over the last 5 years or so, and everybody's wanting to build a platform, right? If you're in a product company, okay, I'm going to be the platform because that's the business model that dominates. But if you think of this from just purely from an architecture and what's in your best interest as an enterprise, do you really need another platform that's specifically for IoT, or should you be thinking that I need my infrastructure, my enterprise architecture should accommodate IoT capabilities in it? So I think with our products, we have to think about, we operate in this heterogeneous environment. There's a lot of open source innovation that our customers want to take advantage of. There's many vendors in this space. Nobody's going to just buy one platform and standardize on it. I think we have to think in terms of how we honor the investments that our customers make in our technology. And I would love to put 60% of the capabilities that are in an IoT platform today, in the data infrastructure, and say that's really just what you should have. If we're keeping up with the times, you should be able to ingest data from the edge, process it in the cloud, store what you need to store on-prem. You should be able to serve that up to applications in an easy way. And is that a platform? I mean, it's your platform as an enterprise, your technology platform, but you're not looking for a vendor to lock you into a platform just because there's an architectural shift and they're trying to take advantage of it. That's my view on it.
I love that. It's really, I mean, it is tricky, right? And so it's a great view. It's a great point of view, and looking forward to seeing where that goes. So, Edge. Where's that gonna go? Are you gonna, I saw this interesting. I don't know if you saw this at CES. The Intel CEO talked about. There's this term I can't remember. It's not a pixel, but it's a spot in three-dimensional space.
A voxel.
A voxel. Thank you. That's it. And so the idea is they're gonna show off voxels tracking for the Olympics. You talked about processing in distributed applications. I gotta imagine when you do this, you gotta process right there on the edge in these devices, because these voxels move at 100 miles an hour at times, when they go downhill. What's going to happen? How's that going to go? And what are you going to do around that? I'm not asking for roadmap, but more so strategically. What do you think?
The edge is such a vast, area. So I have one kind of area of it that I focus on a lot. But I think the things that I'm focused on is how does the processing distribute? Because some things have to happen at the edge for various reasons. Some of it is speed, in a real-time control loop on a piece of equipment that, has safety implications, or an aircraft engine or something like that. Yeah, you need to be close to the piece of equipment. But I think there's other reasons too. If you have, if you look at the entire network topology of the solution that the app runs on, what if you have an app that runs across a lot of offshore oil platforms, and those are connected via very expensive sort of satellite links? Am I going to do the typical thing and just take all the data off of the sensors and send it into the cloud for processing, and then send it back? Or am I going to need to do, am I going to need to distribute that, ingestion and be smart about it and do some of it at the edge, some of it, in the gateway, some of it, on-prem, and some of it in the cloud? How do I train models in the cloud and then send them down and have them be run on the edge? Again, for cost of operations reasons, just as well as the physical time needed to do stuff. So I think processing power is going up at the edge. This network storage compute is all improving, and it's improving at the edge too. So now we're going to be able to take advantage of that, and our apps can can run more efficiently and effectively if we architect them for it. But we haven't needed to in the past. And now that's sort of on the vanguard of, how we write the apps. And I think that's what I'm fascinated by. And so I think there's going to be a lot happening where the infrastructure and the app, kind of optimize for that new topology and architecture. And I think smart infrastructure is going to be something that we all start to expect, so that it lowers the complexity of writing the app in that kind of a context. And you just need to operate you can go dial up and dial down your containers in the cloud and kind of control your costs associated with that, set limits. I think you're going to want to do that at the edge too. You don't want some developer coming in and developing an application that creates a data pipeline that starts sucking all the data off of your oil platforms over expensive things, and then you get your bill at the end of the month and you're like, ah. So I think we got to start thinking about those kinds of problems.
Yeah, the data and how much data flows at scale is definitely always a factor in the cost calculations, and when you do ROI, that'll get forgotten. So, well, Brad, we're about out of time. So, anything that you want to talk about that I haven't asked you about? Any sort of thing I should have asked that I wasn't quite smart enough to?
I want to know, Robert, what is your New Year's resolution, man? What are you going to be focused on in 2018?
So it's interesting. Last year, I had a real big resolution. I've had this for many years about health, right? And I've actually been pretty proud. I've lost quite a bit of weight, and I go work out all the time. I play hockey again, which is great. This year, there's something about taking my passion around IoT and putting that into something around helping others. I passionately believe that we can do more in healthcare with IoT. And so I think there's something about giving back for me this year around my technology knowledge that I want to do more of. And so that's one of it. I have a little thing where I talk about the human impact of IoT. And so I want to do something around this. And the thing that I saw, which there was an article in Australia, there is actually a pill that they're developing now that you swallow, and it actually tracks your gases in your body and it stays in your body 6 months or something like this. And it gives you interesting insights. So I'm going to go and do a bit more on that. And so that's my resolution for the.
I know we're out of time, but I love that resolution. I was at a research lab right before the break, and there's this little robot, not really a robot, but it's more like an Amazon Echo thing, but it has a face sort of that's being developed to help people with Alzheimer's disease, sort of in a gentle way, kind of learning their behavior patterns and reminding them to take medicine, or if they want to place an Alexa order, for example, for groceries, and they forgot they had already placed the order, you ordered, you know, a lot of milk or whatever the day before, it'll remind, are you sure? Are you having a party? Do you need all that milk? I saw some, I think some interesting things are happening around that and around autism, and how, you know, devices can help children with autism. I think that's a really worthy area to spend time.
Yep. Well, maybe I call on you and we go somewhere together and do some of this, because I think between you and I, we can have some great synergies. So
that'd be great.
Brad, thank you so much for joining. We've come to the end of Coffee with Mr. IoT. And I want to just invite you, please join me again next Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, for another Coffee with Mr. IoT. And by the way, if you missed any part of today's conversation or any past episodes, you can watch it again on my YouTube channel. And with that, have a great Friday. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, Robert. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.